Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. This is Sarah Profit. I'm the instructional designer that's been managing the HUMS270 development. We also have Kara Ayers on the line here, our developer for this project. So I'm just going to quickly go through some background on our process so far. So basically, we started out with our textbook assignment and making sure we had all of the resources that we could use from the textbook for the course. And then Kara worked on the session alignment matrix, which we call the SAM. That should have been, you should have seen that in your email inbox for committee members. That was sent out during milestone 1. And the session alignment matrix is just basically a gigantic blueprint of the course. It has everything aligned across course outline of record objectives and then our session level objectives. And each learning activity, assignment and assessment, and supplemental activity is aligned with each of those objectives. Throughout the process, Kara has been our subject matter expert, so she has been able to compile all of the learning resources, activities, assessments, etc. in regards to content. And then obviously committee members, we ask for your feedback throughout each milestone of the project. We have 5 milestones, the first one being the SAM that I mentioned earlier. And then milestones 2 through 4 are the building of the sessions of the course, so sessions 2 through 16. And then milestone 5 will be once we wrap up everything with development and we have the course tech checked and everything's looking good on the technical end. Then we release the course for summer. So that's the entire process. And then obviously my role as instructional designer is to make sure that we have consistency across the course and that the organization of the content is laid out in a way for student success and that aligns with our Quality Matters standards as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Kara, and she's going to show the syllabus to start with. So I'm going to change the presenter rights to you, Kara.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, so I'm going to start with the syllabus. Before I do that, I'd like to just give just some really brief background on how I kind of approached the SAM development and also just kind of the overall feel for the course. So anytime with multicultural counseling, there's actually some strong evidence-based support by the psychology duo of 2 brothers, Daryl and David Sue. So it's referenced frequently in the literature as Sue and Sue. And their approach really emphasizes 3 kind of tiers to teaching students how to be more culturally competent. So I tried to use that that approach to the development of this course, and I kept it in mind. And I even tried to also teach students that this is kind of the way that we learn to be culturally competent, because it can be very overwhelming to try to tackle the task of learning. Sometimes students can feel like that it's impossible to know everything about every culture, especially when we open their mind to understand that gender and sexual orientation and disability are also included in cultural competence. So the 3 kind of tiers that we used were awareness, knowledge, and skills. And so I went reinforced those 3 kind of concepts throughout the course in terms of students developing their own self-awareness, knowledge about different cultures, and then also skills in working with different cultures or other individuals that are members of their same culture. So you'll see those kind of 3 goals underlying the assignments, and also as you move through the course material, I consistently make an effort to address each of those. So it is a unique course in that it does involve self-awareness from the students, more so than just making information relevant to them. It's actually a learning objective that we have, is for them to be aware, become aware of their thoughts around cultural diversity, and also aware of other people's thoughts and kind of the implicit things or biases that we might not see. So that's just a little bit of background about kind of my approach with it, with the course development. To take you through, so our required text for this course, there's just one. It's by Hayes and Erford, Developing Multicultural Counseling's Competence, a Systems Approach. This was an excellent text. I think it'll be an appropriate level for our students, and it offered a number of really great resources in terms of pullouts that are within the text, and so I actually integrated those into our audio highlights that I'll show you in a bit, encouraging students which one of those were particularly useful, especially for developing their self-awareness, and also some of the pullouts within that text have some great ideas for skill development as well. So to take you down a bit further. Okay, so we get down to the assignments and grading portion, and I'll walk you through these session by session just to give you a general idea of how points are allocated for this course. So we have some introductory assignments, just a quick syllabus quiz to make sure that students are aware of the assignment types with this class and just aware of kind of our general process of business within the course. And we also have an opportunity for them to introduce themselves, which aligns with Quality Matters standards as well in terms of getting oriented to the course. So there are a number of different learning activities related to textbook reading, reinforcing that reading through PowerPoint presentations, and also through what we call audio highlights throughout the course. And these are meant to be briefer, kind of as they state, highlights of the lecture. So I reinforced to the students several times that this isn't meant to be a line-by-line lecture, but rather really emphasizing some of the high points of the reading. And so they're encouraged to maybe listen to these highlights before they read to guide their reading, or after to kind of review it, or some students may even choose to do both. We also use a discussion board format to encourage student-to-student interaction as well as student-to-instructor interaction. There's 8 opportunities for these interactions throughout the course. And really, I try to reiterate within the course instructions and then also here in the syllabus that the response that a student posts to their peers is just as important as their original post. So trying to maximize that engagement and their opportunities to really add to the conversation. Because of the nature of this course, and I knew that I would have some sensitive areas of discussion that a student may best benefit from if they were able to communicate in a more private manner, I also decided to include journal entries. So there are 5 of these throughout the course, and these are private student journal activities that I emphasize with each assignment description that the journal is only visible to the instructor and the student. So, so they can hopefully feel a little bit more comfortable in being more candid and more upfront or honest in these discussions. I also explained that these are typically not necessarily graded on content, and when you see the prompts, that's a little bit easier to understand. They aren't questions that necessarily have a correct or an incorrect answer. Students are more encouraged to expand upon the depth and the willingness of their reflection. We also have a number of study quizzes that are embedded in this course. These are intended to help the students prepare for the exams. So they eventually accumulate to create a pool for our exams. So they represent content material from our course, from our textbook, and our PowerPoints. And then, as I mentioned, we do have course exams. So there are 4 timed open book exams for this course. And the reasoning for them being timed was just to really encourage students to study and use their resources, which my both instructor and developer position is that this is much more consistent with the real world, and that we do have resources available, but we need to be familiar enough with the material to know where to look quickly to double check, or we need to know the material without the help of those resources. So so the time limit was kind of determined based on an idea of some general support of the student with resources, but not enough time to look up every single question in its entirety. And finally, we have a couple of larger scale projects that the students are reminded about or even do pieces of throughout the semester. But some of these are due towards the end. So this first one, the Cultural Immersion Project, really goes along with the idea of developing an awareness, developing knowledge, and developing skills. And so students are encouraged to select a cultural group of interest with whom they have little or no experience. And we clarify from the start that this group could be a different ethnicity, religion, or cultural group from the student. And I give them some other concrete examples, including it could be elderly people who reside in a nursing home. It could be individuals with a disability. It could be the homeless. Some students may elect to go to a different church or or religious ceremony than maybe they attend in their own personal lives. So these are all options, and this cultural immersion project will be in 3 parts. So it's not all at once for the students, and it's really kind of broken down into easing them into this experience. So the first part is a distant encounter, which means that students are just going to research and read about the group that they have selected. And this will also give students a good opportunity to check in and make sure that this is 100% the group that they want to spend time this semester kind of learning more about and immersing themselves a little bit within that culture. So some students may start to look for sources and then may realize that they want to pick a different group. And so this would be the time to do that in part 1. Part 1, the distant encounter. Part 2, the group encounter, you'll see it's allocated a few more points than part 1 because it is a bit more time-consuming and perhaps more difficult for students, and that they will actually attend and actively participate in two events related to their selected cultural group. So I give some concrete examples about what might qualify as an event, and then the students just answer a set of questions related to that experience. You'll see I've repeated throughout these 3 kind of assignment descriptions that this is not a paper, and what I mean by that is students aren't expected to write kind of your typical essay format of the paper. Instead, they simply respond to questions that are provided for them within that assignment, and we'll see that in Blackboard. Each of these parts also has a forum part, so you'll see Cultural Immersion Project Part 2 Forum, and that's actually within our discussion board. So it gives students the opportunity to talk among themselves about their experiences and really share kind of what they found at each step. So at the research step with the distant encounter, at the group encounter step with actually going and having some face-to-face contact with these different cultural groups. And then at the last step, it's the individual encounter and synthesis. And this one also allocates more points than the previous step because it is thought to be a bit more time-consuming. And this is where students will actually conduct an in-depth 1-hour interview with an individual or couple from their cultural group. So the idea is reinforcing the concept that you'll hear me mention many times throughout the course, is that individuals are always going to be more diversified than the groups that we study, which is why that it's virtually impossible to become culturally competent just by kind of learning about each group, because we can never learn about each individual. So this assignment was intended to help them kind of have an opportunity to have an in-depth interaction with an individual from the cultural group that they select. To have that interview, they need to plan their questions, and actually turning in their list of questions is included in the rubric. And so the planning for the interview is also thought to be some of the time that they'll dedicate to this assignment. And that too has a forum component where they'll talk with their classmates. The final assignment, and this is one that is due at the end of the semester, but students in our instructor guide, which I'll show you in a bit, are reminded of it and encouraged to look ahead much earlier than that. But this is just a cultural family background outline and paper, and it includes a genogram. And this is kind of a hallmark of many multicultural counseling classes, and it gives the students the opportunity to pull together information on their own multicultural background. And we try to give them a format for that so that, again, they're not left with that daunting task of just this open-ended paper. So we ask them to not only pull together kind of a general outline of 3 generations of their family history, but also we give them the format of a genogram, which in many human services fields is also an intervention that's used with participants. So kind of, again, giving them that skill that can be useful in their professional development as well. And finally, there's the research component, which they've already practiced early in our course in the part 1 of the cultural immersion, in terms of let's challenge them to pull together some scholarly sources as well as some media sources to kind of compare and contrast to what their thoughts are on their multicultural background. So those are kind of all the components of the course. I've got a point breakdown here that could help students kind of look ahead at their grade, track how they're doing, see the different assignments that they'll be doing over the course. And then I kept the grading scale as a kind of a general total system, and so they would be able to see kind of where they are at different points in the course. Things are not weighted. 1 point is 1 point in the way that I develop this. I find in my work as an instructor that it's a little bit easier for students to keep track of things and understand our grade Grade Center that way as well. This is just a quick view of the calendar, which is available under the calendar section. And because this course is going to be piloted using the calendar tool, these will all be added as events in the course too, so that students can use that to keep up with their course. Okay, I think I'm going to start with the session breakdown. Let me start. Oh, I want to show you one other thing under instructor resources. I did include a session-by-session guide. And as I explained in that item description, this isn't intended to kind of be intrusive to the instructor's individual style, but instead just to kind of give a roadmap, especially since all students or all professors will be new to teaching this course. It's intended to give a little bit of a roadmap in terms of where you might direct students, and so these might be good to integrate into weekly announcements and just kind of encouraging students when to look ahead. So in Session 3, I encouraged students to go ahead and start looking ahead at their cultural immersion project. That way they would have, you know, if they had never looked at it after the syllabus, they would still have a full 2 weeks to think about that. And some of our larger scale projects, I give even more time for that. So you'll notice that I point to Cultural Immersion Project Part 2, approximately 3 to 4 weeks if we were in a typical semester format before that would be due, because that does require a student to kind of set up and plan and schedule for an actual physical face-to-face visit to an event or a group. So I give even more time for that. And then I also give a large window of time in Session 7. I actually point them ahead to one of our last assignments, which is the Cultural Family Background paper, which isn't due until Session 14, but just something that I want to be on students' radars long before that, ideally. So that is included just as an instructor guide or a session-by-session instructor guide to help out. Okay, let's take a look at Session 1. Each session starts out with kind of an overview on the class session screen. And that overview is repeated once they actually click in and enter their overview. They're able to see learning objectives, both the objective level and also the competency level that will be covered within this session. I maintain this area as kind of a general checklist, so you'll see that I include things here that aren't graded or for assignment, or you know, or don't necessarily have a point value. For example, ordering a textbook or reading a chapter, but just as a general kind of higher level idea of what students need to do or expected to do this session. And then when you click in learning activities for this session, in this particular session I include a little bit more description in terms of where they can find their syllabus and some ideas about what they can expect from PowerPoints that they're intended to serve as study guides, so that they, you know, and highlight the most important material, but that students will still be expected to read the material, and that's really their key to success. In each session, I include audio highlights for every chapter. So you'll notice a few sessions include more than one chapter, and in those cases I have more than one audio highlight. So these audio highlights range from around 5 to, I believe, 10 minutes in length. Try to keep them brief so that students would listen to them and find them useful in kind of hitting the high points of each of their chapters. We also have learning links, which are, I emphasize, you know, they're not required, and they're not, the material itself is not covered in study quizzes or exams, but a lot of times they're multimedia opportunities to learn or apply what we've learned in that session, and also to see professional organizations that deal with whatever topic we've talked about. So it would be a great opportunity for students, if they were interested in learning more about whatever specific topic it was, they can check out these different links, and you know, there's all kinds of opportunities to join listservs or groups or like Facebook pages that are associated with these different professional organizations, or different multimedia kind of tools to learn about the topic. So after they've completed the learning activities, this would generally be the order that they would process kind of through each session. We would move to assignments. In this particular session, we have a syllabus quiz, which is just very basic, intended to help them make sure that they understand the main points of the syllabus. For this one, they can take it up to 3 times, and it's only worth 5 points. It pairs with actually this introduction discussion for their introductory points, which I think total to 10 points. So I do clarify that usually our discussion boards are worth 15 points, but this is not quite as difficult as some of our other ones, as they're just expected to introduce themselves to their classmates. This session also includes the first of several study quizzes, and these study quizzes are always 10 questions, even if the session has more than one chapter. They're not intended to be lengthy or intense time commitments for the students, but rather we know research tells us that practice tests are one of the most effective ways to learn content. And so these aren't necessarily, I don't call them practice tests because they do have a small point value. They're worth 10 points each to the student. So I call them study quizzes, but they're intended with that mindset of practice testing in mind. So again, they can take these up to 3 times, and their highest grade is what's counted. These are not timed, and they're welcome to use their books and their notes. I do encourage them to take it at least once without their books or notes, or without at least a heavy reliance on those tools, so that they can get a handle on how well they learn the material. And then finally, there's a summary at the end of each session which kind of ties it together, and then also gives them a really brief overview of what they can look forward to in the next session. So moving forward to, I'm actually going to pop on to session 3, because in this kind of session overview, I want to give you a look at each type of assignment that I have. So we'll hit everything without being too repetitious. So in session 3, this is actually when students will have their first exam. So again, they have their audio highlights and their PowerPoint study guide and their learning activities. But after that, in their assignments and assessment, this will actually be the first session that they will have exam 1. So it lets them know how many questions that they have, 50 multiple choice questions on each exam. It lets them know what chapters this covers, and then their time limit. So, and again, this session is a little bit unique in that it also includes a study quiz, just to give them an opportunity to review an opportunity to kind of practice test on each of the chapters that will be covered. So because this chapter included chapter 4, we have a study quiz to review that material, and then it's integrated into chapter 4 is included in their exam. And the next session that I want to show you as kind of a unique assignment type is session 4. And you'll notice that the topics of our session, so this one is on gender and sexism, I think I'm able to integrate the learning activities and also some of these kind of higher level assignments for the course in general. So to be specific about that, the Cultural Immersion Project Part 1 doesn't necessarily deal with gender and sexism. Students may choose that as their group of interest, but it doesn't necessarily have to. This is kind of, again, one of those overarching goals to develop awareness, knowledge, and skills in their cultural competence. So let me give you an idea of that assignment. So the assignment instructions are broken down here, and I mentioned that these are not papers, that they're actually answering a few questions, and I give students an idea of even about how many words their questions or their answers for each question should be. And I'm also helping them look ahead in terms of recognizing that parts 1, 2, and 3 of these assignments do go together. So it will be important for them to put enough thought into what group they're selecting for part 1, and recognition that they'll be sticking with that group at least for parts 2 and part 3. And so I kind of walk them through the steps to that. And then there's also a rubric attached to this assignment. And I wanted to show you where each of the, oops, sorry. And I must have lost it. Can actually get it right here. So each of the rubrics are attached to the assignment so that instructors can can grade within the assignment using the rubric, and students can also view the rubric to see which point values are available for each kind of piece of their assignment, but also to see how they did to get feedback after each piece. So you can see the rubrics are broken out here. And there is a different rubric actually for each part of the Cultural Immersion project, primarily because they are so very different in what they expect. So part one mostly is more research focused in terms of students are going to choose a group and read about it and then answer a few questions about it. The other parts are more focused on their experience, so it's more experiential learning and reflecting on that. This session also includes the first of our self-reflection journals, and I mentioned that these are intended to be, are usually more kind of sensitive, thought-provoking prompts that students may be able to respond more in depth to if they could do it on a more individual basis. So I remind students that this is private dialogue between you and the instructor, and I give an idea of about what we're looking for in terms of word length. So we're looking for about a page if you go with a 300-word kind of idea of a page. So, you know, not too brief, but also not too time intensive. So this is a self-reflection journal, and these also have rubrics attached. And to give a quick idea of that, this one is very basic in terms of depth of reflection is all we're looking for. So again, there's no kind of right or wrong answers to the self-reflection journals. We're just really wanting students to develop their self-awareness and reflect on these topics. Okay, going back to the session page. I want to take you to session 6 now. I haven't yet had a chance to show you discussion boards, which are actually, they start back in session 2, and there's quite a few. There's in total 8. But to give you an idea of what those look like, we have here this, so this particular discussion board challenges students to read an article that was written by an individual with a disability, and then to kind of respond to that article, but also to propose a better way based on kind of her critique of, in this case, disability simulations. And each discussion board also has a rubric attached to it. To give you a quick view of that, you can see that the discussion board rubrics also include the reply post. So and here we're gauging in terms of thoughtfulness, quality of writing, kind of depth is important, and following instructions related to the discussion board prompt. So answering all questions if they're proposed. So this is session 6. This session is a little bit unique in that it also includes a self-reflection journal. So you know, and these were intentionally diverted like this to, again, allow students the opportunity to reflect in a little bit more depth on a topic that might be more sensitive while also benefiting from the kind of larger scale student-to-student interaction. Now I'd like to hop to session 8. This session includes Cultural Immersion Project Part 2. So to bring you down here, it also includes the forum. And Part 1 also included the forum before. I don't think I went into depth about this, but it looks very similar in terms of just an opportunity for students to reflect upon their experience with the cultural immersion in each part of the project. So again, these are not meant to be papers per se. They're meant to be more like guided question and answer assignments for the students. So you can see that this one is a bit different than the past Cultural Immersion Project Part 1 because this focuses more on their experience. So what event did they attend? What happened? How did their experience of actual cultural events compare with their expectations? Are there any current surprises in what you're finding out about this culture? So all in line with what research tells us is helpful to help students kind of develop their understanding of other cultures and their openness to learning about ways to work with diverse needs. And I do try to clarify to students, I know that it'll be unique for them sometimes they tend to look at things only in kind of like the paper tunnel vision that I need to make a paper, I need to write a paper. So trying to clarify along the way that this is a bit different than that. And then again, here is the forum, the discussion board forum. Now I'm actually going to hop down to session 14. It's not because there's not anything exciting in sessions 9 through 13, but it's because you have already seen each type of assignment that are within those sessions. So there's a number of other discussion boards that are within there, of course study quizzes, an exam. Exam 3 is actually within session 12, and also self-reflection journals. But I wanted to show you session 14 because it includes our cultural family background assignment. Okay. So this assignment, I broke it down into 2 pieces so that students wouldn't have to kind of submit this giant document into one. And also I figured that students would need some more detailed instructions in terms of how to create a genogram. So I really break that down for them step by step by step. Also include an outside resource, a WikiHow, in terms of how to make a genogram. And they have a number of options in terms of there are a number of very easy free online tools that make genograms. You can also easily do this in a word processing program. Word, PowerPoint can make a genogram. It looks very similar to a mind map. In addition, if students wanted to, as long as they uploaded it in one of the appropriate formats, they would be welcome to physically draw it and scan it in if they wanted. I don't anticipate that most students would do that, but as long as it's in a format, I wouldn't see why that would be problematic. I also have detailed instructions here for the cultural family background paper and outline, and the outline actually, as I explained to them, the outline actually guides their genogram. So it's nice, and that even though these are laid out as 2 different assignments and allocated 2 different points, it's nice that when they're working on the background paper and outline, it's actually creating the material that they'll put into the format of the genogram. And this also includes a rubric. Let me show you that. Okay. This one goes into a bit more depth in terms of their requirements for this assignment. So it's to integrate scholarly research, media resources, the depth of their content, the interviews that they're supposed to conduct with their family members or a family member, and then the outline for their genogram. So this is the rubric for the outline and paper portion. This is worth 75 points. And then there's also a rubric for the genogram itself. And so you can see there's nothing, and hopefully students would realize, and I actually included this in my session-by-session guide, that there's nothing here for artistic ability in making the most beautiful genogram. It's more about that they've created their personal genogram, so it includes the 3 generations of family and the requirements that are specified in their instructions. That they have the information sequenced in a way that is clear and organized, logical, and then just some very few points, but just in recognition of creating a professional finalized project that doesn't have grammar or obvious spelling errors. Okay, so this is I do recognize this is a larger assignment, so there aren't any other really time-intensive assignments attached to this session. There is just this discussion board along with it, but in addition to that, I also include reminders, encourage instructors to include reminders in the session-by-session instructor guide that I created. And really, this paper would be no more labor-intensive than kind of end of the semester term paper that might be more common in other courses. Session 15 includes our 3rd and final portion of the cultural immersion project. So this also is thought to be a bit more time intensive than some of the other activities. So for that reason, it is the only assignment. It also includes the forum, of course, to discuss the experience with their classmates, but there aren't any other assignments that would require any other writing at this point. There's their typical study quiz, which will get them ready for our last exam in the final session. But really, this session's focus is on this cultural immersion project, part 3. And so I give students some support in developing a list of potential questions for their interview. This link is a great resource in terms of giving them a long list of questions, and then they're encouraged to select 8 to 10 of those questions. So I encourage them, you can try to do more if you want, but choose at least 8. Students typically overestimate the number of questions that they will need because they don't realize that ideally you're going to get really in-depth answers to questions, so that hour can go by quite quickly if you have people really engaged in the questions you choose. And so I walk them through step by step kind of how they'll go about planning this interview, conducting the interview, and then what exactly they should turn in. So I do also attempt to protect the identity of individuals who participate in our interviews. There's absolutely no reason that we would actually need names, so I encourage them to use letters or initials when they write up their summary responses, which is actually a good skill to develop with their professional development, as well as in most of their fields that they'll go into. Privacy will need to be protected whenever possible. Okay, and then finally I wanted to show you session 16. It's a little bit unique as the wrap-up kind of session. So it doesn't include any new learning activities. This would typically be during that kind of shortened finals week. And it just includes exam 4, which is over chapters 16 through 19. So each of our exams cover around, I believe, 4 to 5 chapters, no more than that. So there are 4 spread out across the course, so that with the hope that none of the exams are too overwhelming in terms of the amount of content, but also with the hope that we're kind of encouraging students to learn each part of the content and dedicate equal amounts of time to study. So there's not a cumulative exam for this course. This one also includes 50 questions and is timed, and again, it has to be completed in one sitting. And then the last activity that students are encouraged to do for this course is their last self-reflection journal. So kind of wrapping it up in terms of offering them the most kind of room to be reflective and thoughtful in their discussion with to their instructor. So again, this is more of a private reflection, and they can respond to these last few questions. Okay, I think that is kind of the general course overview. I might be, Sarah, can you think of anything else that I should cover?
The only other thing is just if, in case you wanted to, just click on the discussions tab and scroll through some of the topics of discussion. That would really be the only other thing I could think of.
Okay.
Did you show the instructor guide yet? We might just open that up, or the session-by-session guide that you were referencing a few times. Maybe just show that as well.
Okay. Yeah, let me.
Two things.
Okay. So I'll start with the discussion board just to give a quick idea. These were labeled not only by when they occur. If students, clicked on the discussion board, they would be able to tell which prompt lined up with each session, but also just a really brief title to what the prompt is covering. So just to give you an example of some of the material that we try to cover within this assignment type is the idea of intent versus impact, so helping students recognize very early on in the course that many times one of the challenges with cultural diversity and with developing cultural competence is that people don't have the intent to be hurtful or to be biased or in any way, but that their impact on another person may be a negative one. And so helping them to recognize those two things don't always align, and again, kind of opening up their awareness to recognizing other people's actions and statements as well as their own. Just to give you another quick example, sometimes I encourage them, because I always want my students to know the difference between kind of scholarly materials but also media sources, and it's not because I believe one is more valuable than the other, but but just because I want them to recognize the difference between those things. So I think that some of our other assignments in this course allow us to do a really good job of looking at scholarly research associated with cultural diversity. Our discussion boards give us the opportunity to look at maybe some current events. So here in session 11, we look at the debate among individuals kind of in the mainstream media. This was a CNN post that talks about the debate over Native American mascots. And so students are able to read this article, which provides kind of both sides of the argument or multiple sides of the argument, and then weigh in on the debate and talking about just learning to be respectful in expressing your beliefs, but more importantly, supporting your beliefs based on what we've learned in this course. That's more important, and I try to emphasize that. It's about learning, so hopefully your response would be different than it would be a few months before you took the course, and at least that now it may be supported by what you've learned or not. Just to give one more, I think this one is particularly relevant to maybe some of our students given some of our more rural regions in Indiana. So this question is when diversity is hard to come by. So we do a lot of work in this course talking about how important it is to be around other cultural groups, to learn about differences and similarities, and also to learn about that individual level diversity that I talk so much about in terms of not getting so caught up in what different groups do or don't do or prefer or don't prefer that we forget to ask the individual him or herself. But that's a great idea to be around diversity, but what do we do when where we live maybe isn't diverse or isn't diverse in one of the variables that we study in this class? So as a class, this discussion board allows students and the instructor to discuss a little bit about how can we develop our cultural competence when we may not live in a very diverse region. And I think it would be relevant for anybody because there's practically nowhere where all forms of diversity are represented well. So that will be relevant to everyone. And then finally, oops, I always lose this, the instructor resources. So there are two guides here. There's actually the more general guide. Oops. Which can walk instructors through kind of how to set it up and gives them their general checklist in terms of what they need to do within each of these. I don't think there's anything extremely specific in there. But I also wanted to show you real quick the session-by-session instructor resource. Again, that just includes reminders and when to look ahead. I tried to spread them out just a little bit in the beginning so that all the reminders don't come in session 1 because I know that they're already kind of getting oriented to the whole course or in most cases other courses as well. So for example, I wait to talk about the importance of self-awareness until session 2. So just spreading it out a little bit without doing it too late in the course for them to benefit from it. And so this just kind of walks through what instructors might want to think about in terms of looking ahead and helping students plan for kind of the general outline of the course. Okay. Anything else, Sarah?
Nope, I think that's it. Looks good. I do want to just commend you for all of your hard work, though. It's been really great working with you, and really proud of this course. I think it looks great, and proud of your work. So, cheers to you for all the hard work.
Thank you. I really liked working with you too. It's been fun and another learning experience. So,
yes,
I've really enjoyed it.
Awesome. Okay. Well, let me go ahead and end the recording.